All right, everyone, welcome to What's New in Sigma for the month of May. What we're going to be covering today is going to be a lot around workbook joins, localization, and some other real quality of life enhancements within the Sigma platform. But before we get into our exciting agenda, we're just going to give another 40 seconds, let everybody join, get settled, and then we'll be starting shortly. I'm gonna give it a little bit longer and we'll get started. I'm seeing we have quite a few people. The attendees number keeps ticking up. All right, for the 76 people that have attended on time, we're gonna get going. So if we go to who's in this presentation today, my name is Zack Norton. I'm a technical product marketing manager at Sigma. I'm going to be your moderator today for this webinar. I'll be able to answer any questions within the chat as we go. And I'm joined by Jon Avrach. He's our Senior Director of Solution Engineering and Evangelism. He's going to be taking you through our latest new features. But before we get started, we'd also like to know who's in attendance. So I'm going to launch a quick poll. And if you can just chime in with what your role is, kind of the way that you interact with Sigma, we're going to get an idea for who's here. And we can kind of cater the way we talk to some of these features more for the administrative folks, or if we need to think about it more from a business user mindset. Give that just a second. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. I'm going to share the results. And looks like we have a really healthy blend here between BI analysts, managers, and business users. So great feature list today between workbook joins, which are going to tie to a lot of the business users. You can do left joins, inner joins, all within the context of a Sigma workbook. For the BI administrators, folks more behind the scenes, we're going to be talking about localization. So a lot of fun features we'll be able to walk through today. And if we actually go into the agenda, I'm going to hand off to Jon and he'll get things started. But real quick upfront, this session is being recorded. So afterwards, you'll get a link if you want to watch a rerun. It's also going to be posted on our website. If you have any questions as we go, there is a chat and we'll answer some on the fly. I can handle some of the chat. There'll also be an actual handout with additional resources that you can tap into, just different follow-ups. And we're going to close out with a call to action for what we want to follow this session with. But without any further ado.
Excellent. Thank you, Zack. And Zack, just to double check, you can see the agenda there.
Yep.
Perfect. So let's get this started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time today to join the May edition of What's New in Sigma webinar. So we're going to be covering two main topics and then kind of a grab bag of a bunch of other visualization and usability enhancements. So kind of the star of the show today is a feature that we've been working on for quite some time at Sigma, which is the ability to do joins inside of workbooks. So Sigma has had the ability to do joins in data sets for quite some time, going back to the beginning of the product for several years now. But we've recently introduced the ability to do joins directly inside of a workbook. So I'll give you a demonstration of that and then talk about, when would you use this new capability? Who's it really for? And then we shift gears to localization, We have a lot of embedded use cases that we do here with Sigma with our different customers use embedding, and some of those have Sigma embedded into their portal, which is then deployed to different countries. And to that end, we've added the ability to have those embedded workbooks be localized into about a dozen different languages now. So we'll give a demonstration of that. And then we have, excuse me, just a bunch of other features in there, which will help the day-to-day experience with Sigma. And we'll go into demonstrations of all of these. So the general format here is I'll explain what the feature is, we'll jump into a demo, and then answer any questions that people may have. So if you, as you're seeing the slides or you're seeing the demo, if you have a question around this feature, please do put it into the questions of the GoToWebinar. We'll do our best to answer those live on the call. So for those people who are existing Sigma customers and you're a workbook user, you may have noticed this appear in the product in the past few weeks. So when you go to add a new table, you'll see this new thing down there, which you see in the screenshot on the right, which says join, and it's currently in beta. In the beta, what that means is that functionally it's there, but we're kind of trying it out in the field to see if there's any workflow enhancements and that kind of thing, but definitely feel free to use it. It is a stable feature, which is why it has the beta flag on there. So what is this feature? Well, it's the ability to do full SQL style joins in workbooks. So think about left joins, inner joins, right joins, full outer joins. We can do all those now directly inside of a workbook, whereas previously we could only do these types of joins inside of data sets. So there you'll see the second bullet point there is this capability is similar to what we have in data sets, and I'll explain kind of the nuance of when to use one versus when to use another. So why is this a big deal? What are the benefits here? Well, this can unlock certain use cases. So I work with a lot of customers on both in pre-sales and post-sales capacities to help customers implement Sigma. And sometimes we come across a use case that's a little more complex that requires the ability to do a join on the fly. This is what I would call an ad hoc join. And sometimes there's these more complex use cases like market basket analysis, where you may have to do like a self join or like a Cartesian product. And if any of this sounds a little too technical, if you're more on the business side, not to worry about it. So I'm also going to kind of rehash the feature we have called lookup, which is kind of a simpler version of join that's out there. So let's jump right into a demo and show you what joins look like. So I've got my workbook right here. And what I'm going to do is add a new table element here. So this is how you would pretty much start any workbook. You want to always start with, well, what's the data that I'm going to analyze? What I want to include in my workbook? So in the past, we've had these top three options of you can add a table or a data set that's already been defined for you. You can write SQL if you're more of a SQL power user. And in there, you can do all kinds of joins and whatever you want, or you can upload CSV. Now we have this new option called join down here. This isn't the only way to do a join, but this is what we'll do in the demonstration here. So we're going to add a new data source to the workbook, which will be a join of multiple tables. And we can select raw tables right from our database. That's what I'm going to do here in a minute. But I should also point out that if you have other workbook elements, like if you have a workbook table and you want to join to that, that's also possible. For this demonstration, we're going to go right to the database. This is one of my Snowflake connections here. I've got my SE demo database, and then I've got a retail demo schema down here. And this is more of a feature for people that understand how to do joins and they understand like some of the underlying data structures. So I'm going to select, since I'm familiar with the data, I'm going to select my fact table F point of sale here. And this drops me into the join interface. If you've used joins before in data sets, this will look somewhat similar to it. A little more technical of an interface, but also quite capable. And then I can add a second table here, and I'll go back into the same retail demo schema. And this time I'm going to choose my product dimension. I can choose which columns I want to include in my join. I'll just take them all for now. And then we get to choose what type of join we want to do here. So these are all the standard join types that are supported by SQL: left, inner, right, and full outer. And then we could choose the join key. We can join on as many columns as we want. And we could also join on a formula. If we have something like we want to extract JSON on the fly and then join on the JSON key, we add that ability as well. So Sigma will do its best job to guess the join key. Sometimes it doesn't always get it right. You can just edit that. And I'm going to join product key to product key. So we're pulling in our product dimensions here. And one of the things that we've added that's new versus what we had in data sets is we have some statistics here on the right-hand side. And the idea of this is to let you, kind of inspired actually from our lookup UI, is to let you know how the join did. So I selected product key, joined to product key. Well, did the product key actually produce any matches? And what this is saying is that, yes, it did, because I have a total of 1,096 product keys that are out there, unique products, and 0 of them did not have a match, which means basically that all of them did have a match. So that's good. That means my join is working. So we give you some statistics here, and this can help you let you know if you've set this join key correctly over here. And then I can go to the preview where we have a kind of a schema model over here. And as you join more tables, this will get more and more elaborate, and it'll kind of chain all the different tables together and show you a visual representation of how the join's working. And then I'll just say done, and that's it. Now we have a join. So I have this workbook table here, and we'll call this my retail data. And it has all the columns, because I didn't choose to remove any. It has all the columns from both of those tables, from the sales point of sale fact table, and also from the product dimension table. So I can see my product description, product groups, and then over here on the left, I can see things like my order number, my facts like sales quantity. And then if you look at the lower left, this is where we have the source that feeds the workbook element. The source is different now, since instead of a single table or a data set, the source is actually made up of multiple tables. In this case, there are 2 sources. And if you want to go back in there and you want to add on a table, you can go in and say, well, let's edit the join here, and then you could add tables and add as many as you like here. And then the source of this will change. You, instead of seeing 2 sources, you might see 3 or 4, and so on. Now that this is joined in, this behaves just like any other data source inside Sigma. So if I want to create a visualization off that, let's say we want to do sales quantity as our y-axis, and we'll put maybe let's take product type and put that on our x-axis. So this behaves just like we expect it to in workbooks. And then if I go to the lineage, and we're going to touch upon lineage in a few minutes with lookups as well. You can see the lineage captures the join condition as well. So we have the chart that I just produced here on the right, which is dependent on the retail data. This is a workbook table, and that retail data workbook table is based on the results of a join, which come from these 2 tables over here. So the lineage is a really nice way to trace back all the way from the visualization all the way back to the source data. And if there are joins involved, you can see them right over there. Okay, so we got a few FAQs here, and then we'll take a pause and see if there's any from the folks that are out there attending. So if you have any questions, please do put them in there in the chat. So one question that I've gotten is, well, we already have lookups, so why do I need joins? Now, if you're not familiar with lookups, I'm going to demo lookups in a second, because that's one of the grab bag items where we've enhanced some of the lookup lineage functionality. But I love lookups. Lookups are modeled, they're closely related to VLOOKUPs in Excel. So people love to use VLOOKUPs in Excel, where you have one data source which you're looking up into another data source. Really good for kind of pulling in additional information to your table. And that's what the lookup feature does inside Sigma. So lookup in the join world, a lookup is a lot like a left join. It's the best way to think about it. But it's a little bit easier to use, a little less technical in nature. But since it's also easier to use, it's a little more limited in the kinds of things it can do. So it can't quite do everything that full joins can do. But The joins can let you do use cases which you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So why would you use a join since we already have lookups? Well, if the logic is more complicated, if you have like a full outer join, if you need to change the cardinality of the result set. So what does this mean? This means that if I start off with a 4.5 million row retail sales fact table, if I'm using lookups inside Sigma, I'll never change the number of rows. If it's 4.5 million rows and I do a lookup into it, it'll still be 4.5 million rows. So lookup always guarantees that the row count stays the same before and after, which can be really useful to make sure that you're not artificially expanding the data set and getting an answer that's unexpected. Joins are a little bit more powerful, so you have to kind of know what you're doing here. Sometimes a join condition can result in more rows or less rows than you expect. And that's why we have those column stats in the join interface, is to let you know if you are increasing or decreasing the row count, because it may be what you want, but it may not be what you want. And then another reason why you might use a join instead of a lookup is really just based on personal preference. I myself, I'm a big SQL user. I love joins, but to be honest, uh, lookups are so easy to use that I use them most of the time, unless I really need something that's a little more advanced, like a market basket kind of use case that just requires one of these other join types out there. So a little bit of personal preference depends on how you think about data problems. And another question that I get is, well, we have data sets. Sigma's had data sets for several years now, and we can do all these different joins inside of a data set. So when would I use a join in a workbook versus when would I go to a data set to use a join? And the way I would think about this is data sets have always been and are really still intended for data modeling. So if you're doing data prep, you are more like a BI or a IT type of function at your company, and you're modeling data, you want to wire together joins, put some filters, do some like last mile data cleanup or ETL. All that stuff is done inside the data set which allows you to do data modeling. And I would still recommend, if you're just doing data modeling, if you're kind of curating the data for business users to use that data, stick with data sets, do your joins in there. Nothing really is changing for you here. Data sets have lots of great characteristics. You can do joins in them, you can do filters, calculations. They're reusable, so you can have a data set for your retail data, let's say, or your inventory or supply chain data, and you can share that with different groups of people or teams at your company, and you can build as many workbooks as you want off of those data sets. So they're reusable there. And then you can also do things like row level security on data sets. So when would you use a join inside of a workbook? I think this is really like if you're doing prototyping of different data models, or the analysis, like the market basket analysis, really requires that you do a real join on the fly. So then you might use it. Another interesting thing about workbook joins is that you can join on other workbook elements. So if you do a lot of calculations in a workbook element, or you do some groupings and you want to join on those results, you can do that inside of a workbook using these full join types. So I'm going to pause there. I know that was kind of a lot to absorb. And Zach, just want to turn it over to you and see if we had any questions that came in that we want to cover off here.
Yeah, so no questions yet in the chat. In the meantime, I do want to give a shout out for what we've been seeing, and we'll see if anybody chimes in while I'm talking here. But what we've been seeing with these ad hoc joins and lineage is rapid data prototyping for folks that are getting started on Snowflake, or if they're starting additional use cases, has been super successful. So when you take the workbook ad hoc joins and then you combine it with a feature like the CSV uploads, what you end up being able to do is you give business users a seat at the table to show how they perform their workflow. All like what they're doing ungoverned in Excel today, they can now do it within Sigma with those two features. And then that lineage actually provides almost like a roadmap or a treasure map for the more technical users to say, okay, this is how we can now define this in a more governed data model within Snowflake. So really bridging the gap between the more business focused user. If you set them down, they'd have trouble defining their requirements in plain English because they just do it within Excel. So you give them the spreadsheet, and then you can define and govern it now within Snowflake just by combining those different elements. So out in the field, this has been a killer feature for just rapidly building new data products.
Yeah, it's a great example there, Zach. The rapid data prototyping is definitely something that we see a lot of business users using now, where they're really just experimenting and playing with the data, and workbooks and joins combined with that really unlocks that capability. Excellent. So if you do think of a question on this, not a problem. You can definitely chime in later on. We'll cover off any remaining questions at the end. So let's switch over to localization, very much different topic. And localization, this is our first release of it. And what we're focusing on for the first release of localization is for embedded use cases and what we call embedded viewers. So this is kind of like, think about embedded dashboards. So if you were to build a workbook inside Sigma, embed it into maybe a customer-facing portal that you have, we have a lot of customers that embed Sigma workbooks for their customers, and you can give them all different kinds of experiences. So you can give them a more like a canned dashboard experience. That's what we call the viewer one, where you can kind of look at the charts and do some basic filtering. And we can even do things like drill downs and allow you to save the work that you've done and actually create new analytics. We can do all of this through embedding. If you're more interested in our embedding capabilities, the webinar that we did about 2 months ago, with the recordings posted on our webinar section of our page, I did an entire webinar just around everything embedding. So we cover in depth all the different levels of embedding that we can do. But for this feature for localization, this is around, hey, I've developed a workbook, I want to embed it, give people the ability to look at the workbook like an embedded dashboard, and then have it be in different languages depending on which country they're viewing this from. And the way this is driven, and I'll demo this here, is with a metadata translation file. And what's nice about this is that you can give the file to a translation service. And we worked with some of our customers that did localization with other products to see what type of workflow and file format worked best for their third-party translators. So I think what you'll find is if you do use this feature, that your translation service will be appreciative for the format here. So this lets you change things like column names and what I would call metadata. So it's not going to translate the actual data, but it will translate any metadata, and then Sigma translations will also be provided. So the benefit of this is it allows you to deploy an embedded workbook to different language regions. And I haven't counted the exact number, but it looks roughly like a dozen or so different supported languages. This list keeps growing. When we first released this, we had English and we had French Canadian. And then I looked at this a couple of days ago and I was pleasantly surprised that we're supporting all kinds of languages now. There's a screenshot on the right that shows you the translation file, but the best way to understand this is to just demonstrate it. So let's jump into a workbook that I have built right here. So this might be a typical workbook, which you would embed this into a customer-facing portal. If you're not familiar with embedding, we have the embedding menu right over here in the workbook, and you would go over to the embedding, and then you would choose what you want to embed, like the sales dashboard, take this URL, and we have some supporting documentation that talks about how you securely embed this into your portal. So we'll just remove this for the time being. Now, let's say we want to provide a translation of this. So if you go into the gear icon down here, which is the workbook settings, we keep adding more settings to the workbook. This is where all the themes are. If you want to customize the look and feel, the fonts and the colors, all that good stuff's over here. And now we have this manage locales. And by default, there'll be just one locale, which is English. And then we could add a new one. And there we see all the different languages that we support. We'll choose Spanish for this one here. And the way this works is that you can download the translation file, bring it up into a text editor, make your changes. You'll probably send it to a translation service, that file, get that file back with the translations in it, and then you'll upload it, and then it's tied into the workbook there. So let's go through this workflow here. So I just downloaded it, and what I'm going to do is take this localization file, and I'm going to open it up in my text editor over here. And the format is, we've got keys and then we've got values. So you want to change the value on the right to do your translation. And the values that appear here are, this is all the metadata. So any kind of column names or chart titles or text values that appear in here. For example, you can see this text value, revenue and profit over time. This is just a text element in a workbook, is also a text element over here. So you can translate anything that is basically data that's specific to your data. So what I'll do here is kind of a quick and dirty, I wouldn't even call it a translation, but just to give you the idea, I'm going to do a search and replace, and not really going to translate this, but I'll put in parentheses, I'm going to put the word Spanish in here just to show you that I'm going to change all the values here with the word Spanish in front of it. And then I save that file, go back into my workbook, and then I can upload this here. So here's my localization file. I've uploaded it. That's it. And then we've got a preview button here. And when I go to preview, it's going to be in view only mode, because remember, we only support localization right now for view only. We don't support the full Sigma exploration and building experience in a different language, just for, it's really geared towards embedding for viewer only. And you'll see that this parentheses Spanish that I put in front of every word is now appearing in all the visualizations, all the text elements, even the filters up here, the controls or the legend and the charts, everything has got, that's not actual data values, has this word Spanish in front of it. So like the data values here, like West and photography, we're not translating them because your data values could be infinite in number there. In addition to the user supplied translations, we are also automatically going to translate all of the Sigma widgets that are out of the box. So one of the most notable ones here is the date filtering. You can really see that we're translating this for you, so you don't have to do this. If you want to do like last 7 days, or like next ones, or the current ones, you have all these different filtering options that are available for you. The search there has been translated, and the list goes on and on. So really the idea is once you provide a translation file, you can have a first-class experience for speakers of a different language. If you look over here in the URL, I apologize, it's a little small, I can't really zoom in on the URL, but I'm going to highlight this :LNG equals ES. So this is language equals Spanish. And in our documentation, you'll see all the different language codes. So this is really a note for application developers who are doing the embedding. What you'll do is your application will know which language your end customer wants. And then when you build that URL as part of your application, you'll put this language flag into the URL and give them the experience that you want them to have over there. So that is localization. And let's take a look at any FAQs that we have here. So a common one that we get asked is, well, this is just the view only mode. What about the full localization support? Like really being able to give Sigma the ability to create new workbooks in a completely different language where everything is translated. So this is definitely a question that we get pretty often, as you can imagine. We haven't committed to this yet, but we're definitely looking for feedback in this area. So if this is something that's of interest, do let us know. You can always like ping the chat that's in the product in the lower right hand corner. You'll see the live chat. You can always log an enhancement and give us a little bit of details if you are interested in this, like what your use case is. Are you looking to bring on analysts that are in a different country? And what we tend to do when we prioritize features is we look for areas where lots of different customers are asking for it, where are the biggest pain points, and then we kind of put that into our prioritization queue. So just let us know. And right now, the translation experience is only in the view mode for embedding. Just move this back up there. Zach, any questions come in around localization?
Yeah, and I got a few for joins. And at the high level, time zone support. Do we have any time zone support for localization?
Yeah, so we have some time zone support. It's not down to the user level yet. So I think we still have a little bit of gap here, just in full transparency here. But if you are an admin, the time zone support that we can do today, let's see if I can find it. There it is, the time zone right here. But this is an account-wide setting that we have. So you can set the time zone, but it's going to be for the entire account. So one of the requests we have gotten is, can we have this on a per user basis? So that's kind of that remains to be seen based on feedback that we're getting.
And real quick, I think it would be helpful. Could you show within the tool just where joins exist? So if you just create a new workbook, just like if you're at the home page, how you get to the workbook joins.
Yeah. So let's do a quick recap there. So let me go into my webinar documents here where I had the joins here, and we'll create a new page. And there's a few different places you can get to it. So if you're starting off with a blank workbook and you add a table, kind of similar to how you would add a regular table or a data set, you can add a join right here. In this case, you're kind of building it up from complete scratch, and then you can go in here and you can select your tables. That's one way to do it, but there are other ways to do it. So let's say I already had a table. This is just a single table in a workbook. It's a pretty common scenario, and now I want to join something to this table in a workbook. So this is another common workflow. A couple ways you can do it. You can go up to the menu over here, and under element source, you'll see join. And this is the same menu that's available on the lower left on this. So this is saying on the lower left, the source for this workbook element is this one table, and I can add a join in through there. And then what I can do is select the other table that I have. Actually, in this case, I have another table that's already in here, D product. So I could add that in there. Pretty similar to the workflow I showed before. And then this gets you to the same endpoint. So kind of two ways to get into the join workflow. One is you can add a new element, say it's a join. The one that I've actually been using was the one I just showed a minute ago, which is where I start off with a single table and then I join into it by going into the join over here. It really kind of depends on just what you find to be more intuitive for your workflow.
Great. And a few things that came up. Once the join's complete, that's still going to be live on top of the source tables within Snowflake. The joins can result in creating sometimes a little bit of a messy output. So, John, do you know off the top of your head, I can follow up on this if you don't, is it just creators that have access to joins, or do explorers in some cases also get access?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. I don't know the answer to that one.
Yeah, let me follow up on that. And back to localization, let's see. One of the question was, if I have users in the US and India, then localization can provide two views in two languages.
Was the question, if I have localization in India, can we provide localization in two different languages?
I believe that's a question.
Yeah, so we can do this on a per, I'm going to call it a per URL basis. So let's say you have two different people, two different email addresses that are users of your portal. They're both located in India. Your application can decide when you show the embedded workbook which translation they see, which localized version. So you could have one of them have English, another one have a different language. So what we're not doing is we're not automatically picking up the locale from the browser. That is something that we could do if people were interested, but the requirements that we got around this was that our customers who have a portal for their customers, they want to really control the localization. And often what we find with embedded use cases is your application may already have customer preferences in there, user preferences in there, where people will specify their language. So a lot of the embedding functionality that we have is driven through the URL. The reason why we do that is so that we can easily integrate with how the application is built that you have. We don't want to kind of override what your application does.
All right. Thank you, John. I think we're good to keep going. There's a few other questions, but I'm gonna just tackle them right live within the chat. Excited to get into the grab bag here.
Yeah, those are good questions. And yeah, the grab bag is always a fun section because we always have lots of little features we're releasing, and they kind of add up to a lot. One of the challenging things about creating this presentation is trying to pick and choose which ones I actually show, because there's a lot more than what you're seeing here. So we're going to cover off 4 different features. There were probably another 5 or so which we didn't do. Some of them will overflow into the next webinar, but I pick these based on the prevalence that I've seen with my own customers. So a feature that we've been waiting for a long time, a lot of you have asked for this, is to increase the download limit. So previously we could only download 150,000 rows. If you're in a workbook, you choose the download option, download to Excel or Sheets or CSV. We now support up to 1 million rows. So that's a great feature. And this also was interesting from an engineering perspective because it did require us to rewrite how we do the exporter. The reason why I bring this up is that in theory, we could increase this more in the future because we've changed the way our exporter works. And we'll wait for customer feedback to see that. 1 million rows is quite a bit. We chose 1 million. Why 1 million? People always ask. We chose this because this is really the limit of Excel. And my experience has been, even when you get to a couple 100,000 rows, things like Excel and Sheets, they don't really handle that. They don't really handle that well anyhow. But no real technical limitation around this, just kind of a limit that we have out there for the time being. Lookup lineage. I'll show you a demo of lookups again, just kind of as a recap. We covered this a couple webinars ago. I love using lookups, and we've made lookups better by showing the lineage feature here. And then we'll get into these other ones here in a second. So let's just jump right into the demo here, into our grab bag workbook. And let's start with lookup lineage. So I've got a workbook here with a retail data table. It's got 4.7 million rows. This is our plugs electronics data set. And then I have a table down below, which is built off of the table up here. And what it's doing is it's grouping by the customer key, and then it's summing up the revenue per customer. So the top table is my fact table. It's got 4.7 million rows. The bottom one is aggregated by customer. We have 4,800 different customers out there. Now we know what lifetime spend is. This is a really common type of workflow that we see, where we need to compute some derived metrics off of our original data and then pull it back in. So you might do like a gold customer analysis. I want to see what my top spending customers are here. And this is a really great use case for lookup. So what you can do here is go to the customer key. This is what makes each customer unique. And you can say, let's add a column via a lookup. So really, it's like if you see data in one table and you want to pull it into another table, lookup is going to be your best friend here. So you can choose what you're looking up into. We'll choose customer lifetime revenue. That's the table down below. Choose the mapping key. It's automatically chosen customer key, so it has some smarts there. And then choose which column I want to pull in from the bottom table, which is going to be that total customer revenue. And one of the great features of lookups is this little indicator here. We took some inspiration from this for the join interface with those column stats. And I look at this all the time when I'm using lookups. So what this is telling me here is I'm doing a lookup on this bottom table based on customer key, and I'm bringing in a total customer revenue. So it's saying that 100% of my keys matched. In this case, the key is the customer key. So all of the customer keys up top had a match with customer keys down below. So that's as good as you can get, 100%. And keys with multiple matches, what this is saying is that in every single case where there was a match, it matched one time in the bottom table and only one time. So there's 0%, there's 0 keys that had multiple matches. And that's kind of what I expect, because the bottom table has been grouped by customers, so the customers are unique on every row. If I had customer ID 1 repeating down below, keys with multiple matches would be greater than 0%. And we have ways of handling that too using this aggregator, but we're not going to go into that for this demonstration. We'll just pull in the revenue. I can say done. And now what I have is the lifetime spend for the customer is now in my table over here, and it's coming from the one down below. So that's what lookup does. And then the row count is always going to be the same before and after. So we have 4.7 million rows before the lookup and after the lookup. So that's kind of a recap on lookups. And then for the lineage, in the menu on the top right for every element, we have a view lineage option. And what this will do is jump you into the lineage view, and it's going to highlight the element that you were just looking at, in this case, retail data. And I can see my retail data table has a bunch of visualizations on the right that depend on it. And then if I look on the left of retail data, I can see what's the input to this element here. So this is kind of like we saw with joins. You can have join tables be the input, but in this case, I have a lookup as the input, which is what this symbol is right here. It's showing a lookup. And this is the new feature right here. Finally, we get to it, is we can see all the detail of a lookup on the lineage screen. May seem like a small thing, but if you're a big lookup user like I am, this really helps when you're looking at a large workbook with lots of lookups in there. If you've used lookups extensively, you may get a little bit lost when you look at the lineage screen. You're trying to understand what's feeding what on the data chain here, and using the lineage screen kind of becomes a one-stop shop now. So I can see, hey, this lookup is joining on customer key, and it's pulling in total customer revenue. So this really makes it easy to understand what's going on just by looking at the lineage screen here. So that's the lookup lineage feature. And then let's go to downloading of data. So here I've got a retail data table. I have limited the data to 986,000 rows, so right under 1 million rows. And I will go to the menu over here to do download. And what you'll see here is the row export limit is now increased to 1 million. It used to be 150,000 rows. And the limit applies to all of these methods. I'm going to choose to do a download to CSV. And you may say, well, what's happening now? If you look in the top right, you'll see that the query spinner is going. And if I look at the query history, I can see the download workbook query is running right now. Because we are downloading close to 1 million rows, this is going to take a second. So we'll just kind of let this run in the background. You don't have to wait for it. You can, like everything in Sigma, you can go to a different page and you can just keep using the product and let Sigma kind of do its thing in the background. And I'm actually going to demo the next feature in the grab bag while the download's still going, which is around query history. So here I have a workbook page with a bunch of visualizations on it. Looks like our download's ready, but we'll get to that in a minute. And in the query history, we can see all the different queries that have been pushed down to the underlying database. In this case, we're running against Snowflake, and I can see these queries are for visualizations. And the new feature we just added is visibility to see the visualization name that the query is coming from. So this query right here is a visualization called default gaps. That's the name of the visualization. This one's called custom gaps. This one's called stroke off. Some of you have seen some of our previous webinars, may recognize this workbook from when we covered off all of these different features. This one is margin and profit weekly. So what I can do here is I can click on this visualization in all my SQL, and it'll take me right to margin and profit weekly, which happens to be the first one here. Let me click on a different one to make this a little bit more obvious. Let's take this one right here, custom gaps. There we go. So that we can see it is scrolling down there to the element in question. And this is really great for troubleshooting. You can now associate the query that may be slow with the visualization that it came from. So for troubleshooters, this is an awesome thing. And then let's take a look at the 1 million row export. Zack finally completed. So I have this down here, this CSV file. It'll pull us into my text editor here. Takes a minute to load. There we go. So we've got the first row is the column headers, and then every other row is data. And as I scroll down, you can see there's lots of data here. I'm going to go to the very bottom, and I've got 986,407 rows in my file. Let's see if that's correct. Go back to my workbook, and I've got 986,406. It's off by one, but that's because the first row here is the column, it has the column headers in there. So this is as expected, and I've got my full set of downloads here.
Quick
Okay,
question,
so
John. One thing
yes.
that popped up, if we're thinking about query history, does the request type or query name, what's the crossover here in the usage, admin usage dashboards? Do we also show some of this historically?
That's a great question. Yeah. So in the usage dashboards, we have query history. We have several dashboards that come out of the box that focus on query history, where you can see the raw SQL, just like you're seeing here. And the way that one works right now is we are able, in that UI, we're able to tie the query back to the workbook itself. There's a link to the workbook in the admin UI dashboard, but we're not currently tying it back to the individual visualization. So that is kind of a TBD item. I think that's what the question's asking, and that would be a great enhancement for the usage dashboards for troubleshooting purposes. Any other questions that came up on these three we've done so far with the query history, the download of the lookups?
That's about it. Let's see.
Okay.
There's a little interest in workbook lineage, and if we're thinking about in the future integrating DBT models into the workbook lineage, which I think is a great question. We really like DBT because all that work gets done in Snowflake, then we can point directly within Sigma. But John, unless you know otherwise, I just think that's an interesting thing to bring up to product as a future enhancement.
Yeah, 100%. That would be a very interesting feature to have. We do have a lot of customers that are using DBT, but there's no functionality in Sigma to get visibility down at that part of the data pipeline. That would be a nice solution to be able to show like full lineage there. We do integrations with data cataloging tools like Elation, which may have that lineage information in there. So that's another possibility here. So let me jump into the last thing I want to show. We just talked about usage dashboards a second ago, and there is a new usage dashboard. We're constantly developing new ones here called scheduled exports. So this has been something that a lot of customers have asked for, which is they do scheduling in a workbook to send out emails on a regular basis, maybe scheduled alerts, maybe they have emails which are going to partners or customers of your own, and you want to know, did those people get the emails? Maybe you have conditional scheduling. Maybe you're trying to do some kind of alerts. Did those emails go out? So this is all captured in the scheduled exports admin UI usage dashboard now. And let me just jump back into the workbook to make sure the context is clear here. So if I go into one of my workbooks, what I mean by scheduled exports is in the workbook menu, we have two features, send now and scheduled exports. They work in very similar ways, which will allow you to send via email or Slack, Google Sheets. We just introduced cloud storage very recently, and you can have a schedule in here as well. So here's those different destination types. This scheduling feature is really quite powerful in Sigma. If you haven't checked it out, we've had this for a while. We're always adding on to it, but definitely a really very popular feature with all of our customers. And here you can put in, I want to create a new schedule. You can give an email address, who's going to get this, and you can choose what you want to send out. Maybe you want to export an entire page as a PDF, or you want to export an individual table as a CSV. Same download limits would apply here, the 1 million row limit. And you can set the scheduling over here. You can have a condition, which is what the send is, like if certain conditions are met. And this is a just really powerful interface. You could write any kind of formula logic in your workbook and say things like, in the last 7 days, did my profit margin increase by 10%? And if I did, then this schedule will fire off and I'll get an alert from it. So you can really do some quite robust alerting here. This control section here lets you put in filters. So if you want to do like last 7 days and have it be a floating window, you can put those into the controls over here. So this is what scheduled exports do. And send now is a kind of a special case of scheduled export. It's all the same functionality, well, most of the same functionality, but it's for sending it immediately. So we don't have there's no conditions or filtering here. But if you just want to email data to someone right now, you can use send now. So if anyone, if you had those configured and anyone does send now or anyone gets an email from a scheduled export, your next question would be is, well, how do I monitor that? And that's what the scheduled export usage dashboard is about. So it's broken into two halves. On the left-hand side, we have what we call export tasks. So in that scheduler, let's say I set the scheduler to go once a week on Monday morning at 9 a.m. Every week at 9 a.m., a new export task is created. And if that's an email task, then a bunch of emails could be sent out. And then your next question would be, is what happened to those emails? Were they delivered? Were they bounced? Was there an error in the email address? Did the people who got the emails, did they open the emails? You can see all that in here now. So this is off of our demonstration system where we don't have a ton of emails, but we've got a few here. So we've got this, well, there's the grab bag. I was doing some testing earlier on with the grab bag workbook, and I did an email to myself. And you can see when it started and when it ended. I think this one may have had an error with it. I was experimenting. We can see it there. And here's a workbook which was scheduled at this time, finished at this time. And you can see how long it took. It took 9 seconds to run. And you can see who it's going to. In this case, we're just emailing. This task is just going to one email address. You could have hundreds of email addresses, which are all comma separated, what the subject was, the destination email, and if there was any kind of error message associated with it. There's that conditional scheduling, schedule conditions met. So if you have conditions on there, they may be true, in which case the email goes out, or it would be false. No email actually goes out there. And then on the right-hand side, you'll be able to see for each one of those documents that was emailed out, what actually happened with it. So here's the FinTech workbook we were just looking at, and we can see who it went out to. And if I clear off this filter up top for the event, these are different email events here. We've got opened, delivered, and processed. Just going to clear this filter here, and we can see that this one individual, Anthony, and we can see the timestamps associated with it. This is coming straight from our SendGrid event logs. SendGrid is an email service that Sigma uses to send out all of our emails. It's a third-party service, and it provides really robust logging information. So this particular task fired off at this time, 20:06, and then on the right-hand side, this shows the details. You often will have more than one row on the right for every row on the left. So this one email to Anthony, you can see he's got 4 different lines here, and we have different events. So the email was processed, it was delivered, it was opened, and then it was opened again. We got source IP information, user agent, all kinds of good information here. If you're not familiar with these different events, we have a little help here. This will take you right to SendGrid's page, where you can read all about the 9 events of email. Some good nighttime reading here, and you can see the different statuses which may appear in the email: processed, dropped, deferred. You'll see bounce in there. Email can be a little bit tricky to send out. So we have this usage dashboard now, which will let you figure out, did my person get the email? This is a really commonly asked question. We have a lot of people that are emailing to their customers. Sometimes a customer will call up and say, hey, I didn't get my email. you can now come here and find that out. If you are emailing to external domains, you may want to use this email domain filter. And here you would see different, whatever comes after the @ sign in the email address, you would see those different domains here on the right. So you could quickly filter it out or put the person's email right in here. And it's not just for emails. We have, you remember from the scheduler I showed before, we can send to Google Sheets, Google Drive, we can send to cloud storage, we can post to Slack. So whatever destination you have up there, you will see it over here. In this demo system, we have just G Sheets, Google Sheets, and email, but we can see different G Sheet events here as well. And then if you scroll down, lots of rich analytics here out of the box. You can see it by hour, how many tasks are firing, emails, all different events. As you can see how many emails are going out. We've got heat maps. You can find out which time of day more emails are going out, or what time of day you had more bounces, by domain, by destination. The list goes on and on. And a little known fact is this particular dashboard here is an embedded workbook. And the reason why I bring that up is you can actually go into explore mode here. And if you want to filter on any column, you have the full ability to use the Explorer capability of workbooks inside the embedded usage dashboard here. You can't save what you've done, but you can poke around the data a little more. So what we've tried to do with these new usage dashboards is give all the data available to our customers so they can do their own analytics. Okay, so that was a bit of a mouthful, but that brings us to the end. Actually, we do have a couple more FAQs, then I'll hand it over to you, Zach, here. So the question probably that's been burning is, well, what if I have more than 1 million rows and I download it? Well, I tested this last night and we'll cut it off at 1 million rows. So it still works, but we only do 1 million rows. And if you are using our API, we have a lot of different APIs, which we covered on a recent webinar. But if you're using the export API, which can download raw data or PNGs or PDFs or a workbook, what is the download limit there? So it's the same code path that we're using here, which means that the API is also limited to 1 million rows there. Okay, so Zach, let me hand it over to you, see if there's any extra questions. If not, we can go into wrap up here.
Yeah, so one last thing, and I thought it was in beta, but that cloud storage integration, that's live today?
That is live today, yep, and that lets you, is actually bringing back an old feature which we had over a year ago on our previous product of worksheets and dashboards. That will allow you to save or export to S3 or Google Cloud Storage. And what's interesting about that one is the download limits are higher. So we have, I believe it's a 5 GB limit that applies there. So that's really good for, hey, I want to dump a bunch of data out, put it up into a staging area like S3. So that exists now. It's labeled as a beta feature, but feel free to use it. I've used it. It does work well. It'll drop a file into an S3 bucket.
All right. So I also got some really great feedback for scheduled exports that I want to take into consideration and get back to on. And yeah, really, I want to thank everybody. There's been 73 people, dropped down from 80. I got about 15, 20 questions answered within the chat. Really appreciate everybody's engagement. And just as a follow-up, we do have a call to action, which is, John, if you want to bring up, there's our follow-up resources, but we'd also like to say, please come by and say hi to us in Vegas if you're going to Snowflake Summit. The theme is going to be the world of data collaboration, and that's right up our alley. So we'll be there. We're going to be talking all about bridging the gap between technical users and business users, using that spreadsheet-like familiarity to really get those two people working off the same hymn page. But by the time that this rolls around, there's going to be a whole new slew of new features that we'll be able to demo to you live right within our booth. So please come by and say hi.
Yeah, excellent. I'll be there in person, giving a demo with one of my colleagues, and we'll be showing off 2 brand new features, which probably no one's heard about. So that's pretty exciting, and we're doing that on Tuesday at noon Pacific time.
All right. Well, that's a wrap for today. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.